Welcome to Mine Explorers, episode 4. We've got a special guest today. No cats today, but we have Pepper Dog. Pepper is our Chief Canine Morale Officer. She goes to the office at least 3 or 4 days a week, where she greets visitors. She serves as a doorbell, a repeater,
Bark, bark,
lets
bark.
us know when people are there. And then she mostly extorts people for treats and toys and loves. But she's also very sweet and will cheer people up if they're having a sad day.
But also,
She
more importantly, she is a field dog when she gets the opportunity, which we'll talk about later.
she is a good field dog. She loves to be out in the field, and we have hundreds of photos of her doing field work
Okay.
all over the desert, the forest, everywhere.
And apparently a lap dog, too. Oh, my goodness.
She's somewhat of a lap dog. I think mostly she's just looking for more treats, but we'll let her hang out. Maybe she'll appear throughout the episode a little bit more. So today we have 2 different topics, and doing our trade-off back and forth thing. Crystal's going to interview me about construction aggregates, which we haven't talked about much yet. And then I'm going to interview Crystal about Landman, which she's very aware of. She's worn a lot of different hats in that department, where we'll talk about claim staking and mineral rights and the Mining Act of 1872 a little bit, get into a little bit of mining history. Then we'll do a video. I made another song and another music video we'll show. And we'll do a little bit of show and tell. So first things first, before you interview me about construction aggregates, I wanted to kind of follow up a little bit on last week's episode about tariffs. And it's interesting. So things kind of on a pause with Canada and Mexico, aside from the aluminum tariffs and the iron tariffs, which are interesting. And obviously going to have a lot of impact because a lot of that aluminum comes from Canada, and it's going to have a big effect on American companies, which could be good in the short term for some companies, bad for others. But overall, I think it's really just a bargaining chip to get them to come to the table and figure out something that makes sense. With Canada and Mexico, they seem to be bargaining chips. But then with China, really interesting things. I read today that the price of bismuth is spiking, and that's another China mineral they're putting export controls on, and that's spiking and really going up, and some of the other minerals as well.
What do you mean spiking? Are they putting tariffs on bismuth now? Or?
Yeah, it was one of the last ones, the big basket they put through.
Huh, okay.
So it's starting to really go back up again. Just kind of a rare one that's not talked about much. And then once again, like just looking at the numbers and stuff, China controls a lot of the not a huge amount of the supply, but a massive amount of the processing capability for a lot of critical minerals, and then a lot of the consumption at the same time.
Right,
So-
which is probably the more critical part of the entire supply chain is the processing and distribution, because once it gets to China, then it's all in their hands.
Yeah, because another thing, and I don't think we talked about this really clearly last time, is when it comes to rare earths, they're not rare, they're everywhere. Finding them in economical concentrations is rarer because of the difficulty in the processing
Right.
and the expense of processing. And so it's really that processing capability that's key. There's a lot of minerals we could mine here domestically in North America, but setting up and building that processing infrastructure, and then if the finished product just gets exported to China anyway for processing, what good does it do?
Yeah, exactly.
So interesting. But yeah, take it over. See what you have to say here about construction aggregates.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So construction aggregates is something that, we do a lot of in our business. We do a lot of market studies in that realm. But, when you talk to the general public about, we're in mining, we do market studies for construction aggregates. They have no idea what that means. So I think just for the sake of our audience, can you just give an example? Like when we say construction aggregate, what does that mean?
Yeah. So backing up a little bit, we do more than just market studies.
Absolutely.
But we've built a niche and really established a reputation for market studies, particularly with some of our proprietary tools like mineralocity and mineralocity aggregates, which we'll talk about in a minute. But construction aggregates are primarily crushed stone from rock quarries and sand and gravel from pits and dredging operations. And that's construction aggregates. And those materials are taken and become the base of all modern society. So they go into asphalt, they make up the majority of concrete. You take aggregates and you mix it with cement, and that's where you get concrete, which is in everything. And then they make up, road base, rail ballast, landscaping materials. The list goes on and on and on. But, anything, any road you drive on, any sidewalk you walk on, it's all made of aggregates.
Right. Exactly. And where do we find these aggregates?
They're found all over. There are aggregate mines in all 50 states. There aren't necessarily both types. So some states only have crushed stone and they have a shortage of sand and natural gravel. And then there's other locations that have a lot of natural sand and gravel, but no crushed stone. But there are operations in all the states. Aggregates are, when they're delivered to the mine site, or the place where they're used, the ready mix plant, the asphalt plant, or the construction site, I should say, 2/3 generally, as a rule of thumb, of the expense is transportation.
What do you mean?
Getting the material from the mine to the construction site.
Wow.
So 2/3 of the delivered price is transportation.
So what you're saying is if we had mines closer to the end use, it would, in theory, be cheaper.
Well, and that's why mines are where they're at.
Right.
So construction aggregate quarries and pits are located near areas of construction. And then, one of the challenges we're seeing now is that a lot of these mines are 70 years old, 100 plus years old, and they're depleting materials. And now with urban sprawl happening, they're surrounded by suburbs and homes, sometimes as close as a few 100 feet from the edge of the pit, where they're blasting and doing all this. And these were in the middle of nowhere, and now they're in the middle of urban areas. And so we're seeing quarries get pushed out further and further, which makes that transportation cost go up, which makes construction more expensive, which contributes to inflation and a whole bunch of other things.
Right. Because it all starts from the mine. It really depends on where it's at.
Yeah, and so that's why they're located where they're located. But there's over 10,000 operations in the United States of all sizes. Some of them may only do 10, 15,000 tons a year, operated by counties or local municipalities. And then some mines do 5 million plus tons a year, and they vary. So there's a lot. It's by far the most common type of mining operation would be construction aggregates.
Right. I mean, it's so rare to go into any type of city and not see a sand and gravel mine somewhere along the way.
Especially flying in. I'm always looking for them from the sky.
Yeah, same.
Yep.
Same. So let's talk about ownership. Like, who owns these mines? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's an interesting industry. Ownership is still highly fragmented. And so there are national companies and major companies that have a lot of quarries and pits, but they tend to be concentrated in areas. So like they'll dominate like the southeastern US, or there'd be companies like Granite Construction that has a big presence in the western United States. And then there's companies like CRH that own a lot of subsidiaries that are fairly national, but there's still lots of pockets. So out of the 10,000 quarries in the United States, there are about 5,000 different owner-operators. And out of that 10,000 quarries, probably half are owned by a handful of majors, and then all the rest are individually owned, like mom and pop construction companies that own a pit. A local ready mix operator may own a pit or a small quarry. So the ownership's really fragmented. So there's a lot of different companies that operate in that space.
Interesting. And is it mostly private lands, or are they operating on federal lands as well?
Mostly private.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say 95%.
What about in the West? Because in the West, we have mostly federal lands.
Mostly federal and state lands in the West. But the quarries and pits tend to be concentrated on private lands. But there are some that are public, and they're operated through what's called a saleable process. So they pay a small royalty on production to the federal government or the state
Right.
on state lands. Yep.
What about construction sand? So I know in the past we've heard that, we're having a big sand shortage. We're not getting the right kind of sand. Can you talk a little bit about like what is the difference of sand? Because
Yeah.
you and I might know it's not all the same, but
Right. Yeah. Sand is not all created equally. There's a lot of different types of sand, and sand's incredibly important. So a lot of people may not know this, but in the world, the most human consumed commodity is wheat, and number two is sand.
really,
Yeah. Not consumed as in we're eating sand,
but being used
into industry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sand is a huge,
Yeah.
huge consumed product. So not all sand's created equal. And there have been these sensational articles about people illegally mining beaches and, people scraping up buckets of sand to sell
Yeah.
in some areas. And there are certainly a lot of sand shortages in different parts of the world. And even parts of the United States, sand is being trucked up to 400 miles to reach its destination or put on rail to reach its destination.
Wow.
And construction sand in an area where it's plentiful can be as cheap as $7 or $8 a ton, or as expensive as $40 or $50 a ton at the mine, and then delivered it's obviously 2 or 3 times that or more depending on how far it has to go. But there's different types of sand. So quality sand is for construction uses and many other uses. It generally has a high concentration of silica. So it's quartz, basically, that's eroded down into sand. And when the silica is angular, it's great for construction sand. The more angular it is, the better, because it holds together. It makes great concrete, and it can be skid resistant. Good for building roads and different things, and it holds together well. And then, so that's one thing, is it needs to have a good silica percentage. And the second thing is that it needs to be angular is ideal. So if sand is too rounded, it doesn't make good construction sand, but it can make good frac sand potentially. So the little individual silica grains will hold a lot of pressure because the sphere is a good weight bearing structure, and so they can put a lot of pressure on it and it won't crack. And semi-round sand can make decent construction sand as well, but then there's the size distribution. So it can't be too fine, like powdery. It also can't be too coarse. You need kind of a blend somewhere in the middle, and so that makes it difficult to find.
Right, because you have to sort it by
Right.
whatever size it is.
And you can manufacture it. You can manufacture sand. You can take rocks and crush them down and make sand.
Yeah, which is very expensive.
It is, yes. And you can also take different grades of sand and blend them and process them in ways to make good construction sand. But finding natural sand that's just ready to scoop up, be washed, dried, and go is ideal. So yeah, sand is really useful and it's valuable, and there's a lot of it that's consumed, hundreds of millions of tons annually, globally. Billions of tons of sand is definitely, yeah, it's in the billions. Hundreds of millions in the United States, creeping up to 1 billion, and then globally several billion tons a
Right.
year
It's
of sand.
yeah.
Yeah, and it can be recycled somewhat to an extent, But generally, like once it's built into a road or something else, like
It's really hard to get that piece back.
it's hard to make it back into sand. You can
Yeah.
crush concrete and make rock, and you can make different recycled materials, but getting it back to sand is difficult.
Right, and probably not economical of any sort.
Doesn't make a lot of sense.
No. No, I mean, it's one of the most plentiful, minerals or rocks on the planet. So
Yep.
why make it if you can just find a new source of it?
Right.
Yeah. So you've been in the construction aggregate space for a long time now. You've done a lot of market studies, reports, you have such a vast knowledge of the industry. Like what do you find like really fascinating about that segment of the industry? Like when you think about like construction aggregate, like why do you care?
What makes it interesting to me is having been in mining and in, sexy minerals like gold and, a little bit of exposure to diamonds and looking for jade and copper and things like that. They're fun and exciting, difficult, complex projects generally. And they get a lot of attention. Like somebody goes to open a new gold mine, there's a lot of attention. A lot of people, go out and want to find out what's going on. Construction aggregates are everywhere. They're always happening. You can sit at the side of any highway in the United States, and if you wait long enough, you will see construction aggregates go by.
Yeah.
Whereas like, waiting for copper anodes, to pass by, like you could wait a really long time.
You're not going to see the gold truck drive down the highway.
See a truck of gold bars go by, but construction aggregates you'll see all the time. But almost nobody talks about it. So we have an industry that has over 10,000 mines in the United States of all sizes, billions of tons of production, billions of dollars in revenue. There's approximately 100,000 employees that work directly in mining and quarrying construction aggregates and processing them in the United States. But you almost never hear of it.
Right.
Unless there's a quarry going in your neighborhood.
Yeah, then people are fighting
people
it.
are talking about it and fighting it. You almost never hear about it. And so it's been really interesting getting into that industry and learning about it. And just how important it is and how it really like at the bottom of any budget in any big construction project, like there's a significant amount of money that goes that you may not see directly the aggregates, but you see, the asphalt, the concrete, the cement, all of that. And that's the bottom, the flour and the cake that goes into building that. So aggregates, they're everywhere and they're really interesting. And because I approach the industry as somebody who's more of a generalist in mining, that looks at all mining across the spectrum, right? We work in coal, we work in, some of those unique things we talked about, jade, like sapphires, like some interesting projects through, the base metals, battery metals. A lot of people stop there and they don't go all the way into construction aggregates, but to me, like it's all mining. And so it's been interesting approaching it the way we have. So when we got into construction aggregates really heavily around 2015, 2016, we applied a lot of the data heavy techniques that we used in regular mining towards construction aggregates. And we were able to like build a lot of really neat tools and models and methods for looking at markets and different things. And really we're able to carve out a niche that I think is really unique. And really have tools that nobody else has, like with mineralocity aggregates. And being able to build and deploy new things in a new market is always fun and exciting. And construction aggregates, like there was so much blue sky for a traditional mining consulting firm to really move into that space that we've been able to really build a really high quality reputation fairly quickly. I know 9 years doesn't seem quick in tech or a lot of industries, but in the mining industry, 9 years is actually really fast.
Everybody knows an overnight success takes about 10 years.
Yeah. So we built a really great brand, and we're working with virtually all the major construction aggregate companies, both in the United States and several of the large international companies. We're working with a lot of the big cement manufacturers, and it's cool because we've kind of worked backwards. So we started with valuations and market analysis and the more technical side of the business. And then we've brought in our geology and Landman and things like that to do a more holistic approach where a company can come to us and say, I'd like to put a new construction sand mine in Arizona, and we can find a location. We can look and do the high level market study. We can look at the geology high level. We can go, look at the mineral rights, and if it's federal, we can help them secure them and negotiate. If it's state, we can do that. Also, we can help them find landowners and option a property. We can put together a drill program. We can coordinate the drilling and the testing and build the reserves and build a model and put together a mine plan and help them, commission the plant and everything. And we could do it all just start to finish, which is cool.
Yeah.
But we built it from the top down,
Yeah.
starting with doing the valuations and the market studies and taking everyone else's data and putting it together to now we can start at the grassroots and build it all the way up. And we have a lot of experience along the whole chain, which is cool. But it's been fun. I mean, people say, I've been asked before, if you could own a mine, what would it be? And not a gold mine, not a copper mine. I'd love to just own a nice sand and gravel pit that just runs all day and just
100%.
Consistent, steady.
Yeah.
Production maybe fluctuates a little bit. Pricing in construction aggregates pretty much always stays flat or goes up. During the great financial crisis, it dipped a little bit pricing, but it steadily rose,
but it's going to come back
4.5% to 5% every year.
Yeah.
The last couple of years, it's in some regions, it's been up to 20%
Wow.
growth, sometimes like 10% quarter over quarter growth in areas where there's a lot going on. So
Right. High demand.
it's exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it is exciting. I mean, it's a cool segment of the business that, like you said, like nobody really talks about, but
Yep.
But the people in the industry, they realize how vital it is, and it's really fun to service that.
Yeah.
And the team that we have built over the years, I mean, they're so knowledgeable in that space too. Like,
oh yeah.
And it's just Stu alluded earlier about mineralocity aggregates. I mean, that's something. It's a SaaS product that we built in house, so we could just have all of that data in one location on a GIS platform, which we can talk about in a different episode, but it's just amazing. Like, just, when you get a bunch of really smart people together, on our team, because that's what we have, it's really cool to see, the boundaries that they can push, and they're like, figuring out different ways to innovate. And then you have this end product, you're like, holy crap, like we really just made something completely new for the industry that it's always fun to show people in that space, because it just blows their mind.
Yeah, and if you're interested in construction aggregates, we put together that video, Rock Solid, that we debuted last week about construction aggregates, and we have that video on our YouTube channel that you can watch as well. And then, back to the innovation, like with mineralocity aggregates, Jake, our lead developer on that platform, who's just GIS genius.
Totally.
He's been working with our tech lead, and they're looking at ways to implement AI, where we're actually, and this is very exciting, and we're currently working on an article that'll be published on what we're building, but we're figuring out a way to use AI and our existing data sets to figure out how much material's been mined from every quarry in the United States, every pit and quarry,
wow,
and figure out the estimated remaining life of all the quarries. And we'll have all that deployed on a national scale, and we'll have that as part of the mineralocity aggregates database.
That's insane.
And then now we're mapping. So we have a fantastic tool for mapping truck moved aggregate. And then we have a pretty good handle on rail moved aggregate. But we've recently figured out a way to figure out waterborne aggregate on a national scale, because we do a lot of studies on like ports. Like someone will say how much material goes, how much aggregate goes into the port of Long Beach, and how much aggregate is seaborne and how much is generated locally, how much comes in on rail. And we'll do a full holistic study of the balance. But with this new process we're working on, we'll be able to actually map seaborne and water, barged and like Mississippi, things like that, aggregates and where they're going, and map out all of that and have that data available in the platform as well, which we're
That's
like
so cool.
far ahead on that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the reserve, remaining reserves and that, like, that's way far ahead of anything else. I mean, we're the first company to map out all of the aggregate quarries in the United States that are commercial. We haven't mapped out like every small local county pit and quarry, but all the commercial operations. And then we were the first ones to take all those and figure out their estimated annual production. And then now we're actually going to be able to figure out their potential reserves, remaining reserves, how much they've mined, life of the operations, all that stuff. So it's really exciting.
That is exciting.
So I can talk about construction aggregates for the whole episode.
All day long.
But I want to flip the script a little bit and talk to you about Landman, which is a completely different side of the business. They do crossover occasionally, but
a little bit.
Landman's a lot more focused on precious metals, base metals, critical minerals, industrials, things like that. But before we do that, I made another video that I want to show you.
Okay.
Deep in the Shaft, which I made with, I'll pull it up when I talk. I made it with some archive footage, digging through the internet archives, along with some AI footage that I generated. But I thought you'd like this song. It's a little bit less kind of industry focused, like the Rock Solid song and the Critical Minerals song, and just kind of a little more fun and like mining history. But since that's our roots, I thought you'd like to see this.
Okay.
So go ahead and push the play button and enjoy.
Pickaxe swings, dust in my lungs. Ain't seen the sun since the shift begun. Lantern flickers, shadows crawl. Hear the echoes of the lost ones call. Deep in the shaft where the light don't shine, where the walls hold secrets and the earth keeps time. Digging for a fortune or digging my grave. Ain't no way out once you're lost in the cave. Drills scream loud, timbers crack. Every step forward, feel the weight on my back. Silver veins whisper, just one more load. But greed runs deep where the devil calls home. Deep in the shaft where the light don't shine, where the walls hold secrets and the earth keeps time. Digging for a fortune or digging my grave. Ain't no way out once you're lost in the cave. Cave-in comes, dirt starts to slide. I hear the ghosts of the men who died. Footsteps running, but no one's there. Whispers rising through the cold black air. "500 feet down, don't come home.
I love that archive footage.
It's cool. Huh?
That's so cool.
Yeah, so the blasting section at the end there, that's actually an M-Shaw video on blasting safety.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's actually in color, and it's very like 70s, kind of gritty. Mm-hmm. But I made it black and white to kind of match everything else. But
I like it.
yeah, it's pretty interesting. You can see him yelling out, "Fire in the hole, fire in the hole, fire in the hole." And then they blast at the end, and I kind of slowed it down a little bit and zoomed in to kind of create that effect. But
Yeah, it looks good.
yeah, it's kind of for fun. Trying to kind of build a collection of I've had all these ideas kicking around in my head of different songs and stuff that I've wanted to make for a long time, and now with all the tools and the AI and everything's got to a point where like I can sit down and in like a full day or two create a song idea for a music video and kind of flesh it all out and make it happen. So I'm building a library of mining music.
No, it's been fun.
Yeah.
I had the idea of I've staked everywhere man, the spoof off the Johnny Cash song.
Oh, there you
I've
go.
been everywhere man, and so it was fun to finally like utilize AI to finish the rest of the lyrics.
There you go.
It's fun.
Yeah, so talking about staking, I'm going to put on my interviewer hat here.
Prospector cap,
Prospector
maybe.
cap, yeah. And ask some questions about Landman and claim staking. So what does a mining landman do?
A mining landman looks at the land on usually public lands, that's where we operate in the West, and sees where we can stake mining claims. So we're looking for mineral rights. So typically the federal government or public land, the public owns mineral rights, right? It's managed by the public, it's managed by the federal government, but it's public domain of minerals. So we're looking to see where we can, or our clients can, properly stake and locate a mining claim.
So I think that's a good answer of what most mining landmen do, but I think kind of a more broad look is a mining landman helps mining companies acquire and manage their mineral rights.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I think a good landman does a mix of private, public, state, different estate lands.
Yeah.
And manages all that.
Landman can get complicated really fast. Over the years, we've learned that it's not an easy segment of the industry. It's no project is just simple, right? Like you always have to make sure that the area that you want to locate is available.
And generally, the bigger the project and the more brownfield it is, the more different types of mineral rights you'll deal with, I've found.
Yeah, different types of mineral rights, different types of landowners. That gets really tricky really fast because you think like, if I'm staking on BLM land, then it's straightforward, right? We put a load claim here, we file with the county, we file with the BLM, but sometimes on the rare occasions, the surface will be owned privately and then the minerals will be owned by the federal government, and it's just a mess from there. That's called NOIDLs, so that is Notice of Intent to Locate on the Home Stock Raising Act. And so you can stake land on private property, but you're going after the minerals.
Right.
And that's another complex area.
When you
of
say
the mining.
staking claims, do claims still physically need to be staked?
Yeah, so the fun thing about our industry is claim staking is very much the same way it was back in the 1800s. It really hasn't changed much. There's been a few changes passed by Congress with just like definitions and some minor things. But yeah, so Claim staking means you're going out in the field and you're placing these boundary markers. This is a 2x2x4
Why don't you show them the spike at the bottom and how it works?
post. So this is your typical mining claim for specifically like here in Utah. This is what we use. Is a 2x2x4 claim post with a point at the end so you can pound it in the ground. But this is a claim boundary that you put at your four corners of your mining claim to showcase where your claim is. So you could trace, so the idea is you look at this claim post and then you can trace the boundaries of your mining claim. So if anyone else were to go out there, it'd be like, oh, there's a claim here. That claim, that is not open for location because somebody else already has that ground. Assuming that you did the rest of the steps like file with the county and BLM.
Right. So that's a good question. So what do the steps look like? So say I want to stake a mining claim. I've got a river in California that I like to go visit in the summer, and I pan for gold there sometimes, and I want to stake a mining claim. What would I do? What would the process look like?
Sure. So,
or if I hired Burgex, what would you do?
Yeah, the same thing that you should do if you want to stake it on your own. So the first thing you're going to want to do is figure out who owns the land.
Okay.
So is it state owned? Is it BLM? Is it Forest Service? Is it private? I mean, the list goes on. You want to make sure that it's open for location. So that's where you're going to have to do some research on the BLM website. So let's assume that it's on BLM land or Forest Service land. We can stake in both those areas. We have to make sure that the ground has mineral rights. So is it, because oftentimes we'll see, and this gets really tricky, is the government will remove the mineral rights. So you have to make sure, and for whatever reason, so you have to make sure that those are available. So let's assume that those are available. So you have your mineral rights. Okay, so that's good. The next thing you're going to do is you need to map it out. You need to know what your boundaries are, where your claim boundaries are. Well, I guess before you map it out, you need to make sure that nobody else has a claim there.
Right.
So,
because if I found gold there, there's a
chance,
and it's open for mineral entry. There's a chance somebody else has staked it either previously or somebody has a current claim on it.
Right. So if you're already out in the field, the best thing you can do is just take a look around of your surroundings and see, like, are there posts? In California, you're not dealing with 2x2s, you're dealing with 4x4. So they're much larger pieces of wood. Or you can blaze trees, depending on.
Or rock monuments.
Or rock monuments, yeah. Sometimes PVC pipe, but the BLM doesn't really like that anymore, which is fine. Right. So you want to make sure that nobody else has claims out there. You can do a physical check, or we do a lot of desktop checks, which involves like looking at county records, looking at, public records, and just seeing if anyone else has filed. From there, you can make the assumption, if you haven't found anything, that it's open for location. We also check the BLM MLRS website.
But still, looking on the ground is probably the most important.
Looking on the ground is the most important. It's not always reliable. I mean, if somebody's...
not the most important, but it's a good final step. So if you've done all the other stuff and it's clear, then when you go to stake, looking around and making sure there aren't fresh posts or something there isn't good.
Right, but if the claim is really old, sometimes the posts are no longer standing, but that's a whole nother tangent. So let's assume that there's no posts on the ground, there's no active mining claims, any of the research that you've been looking for. The next thing you would do is you need to make a map, because you need to outline of where your mining claim is. Actually, before that, you need to determine whether it's lode or placer. So if you're panning for gold in a river stream, chances are you're going to be looking for a placer claim. So that is slightly different recording than a lode claim.
They're written differently.
They're written differently. The map, the claim is different. So placer is a straight 20 acres. So
in a future episode, we'll talk about lode.
Yeah, we can get into that. But for high level, so you'll determine it's a placer. You'll map it out. You'll determine where your location monument is. Every state is different, and this is where it gets even more. It can be a little bit more tricky. Every state has different filing requirements, different paperwork requirements, different map requirements, and different post location requirements. So it's not just on the four corners, it can be on the ends, it can be
sides,
sides,
all all of them.
Yeah.
You can have up to 9
Up
posts.
to 9
I think,
posts.
yeah.
And then you have your location monument, which you place your claim paperwork in. So once you have your map, you write your claim paperwork pending on the load or placer, and that has to be done correctly. And if it's not, that is an issue. And let's assume that you're doing it all correctly.
Right.
Which,
if it's your first time, your odds are very low that it's all done right.
I'd be wildly impressed if you got it right.
It's possible, but it's very difficult.
Yeah. So you write your claim paperwork, you have your map, then you go out in the field and you physically stake your claim. So you're going out and taking your wooden post out and you're putting that in the ground with your claim paperwork on the appropriate post. From there, you now have your location date or your date of location, right? So that is the day your location monument, this guy, was in the ground. And so that gives you, that is now your expiration date to record. So you now are in...
The clock's ticking.
The clock is ticking. So if in Utah you have 30 days to get your claim paperwork filed with the county, and then from that filing you have 90 days from date of location to file with the Bureau of Land Management.
Gotcha. And then once it's filed, you file it with the county, you file it with the Bureau of Land Management, and you have a mining claim that's active and valid. What rights does that give you?
A few.
Can I build a cabin there?
You cannot build any permanent structures. That is a big no-no. You still have to abide by the 14-day camp rule. So if you want to stay on your claim and, pan for gold every day, you still have to follow the BLM laws of moving
General
camp.
recreation laws.
General recreation laws, right.
But it gives you, what rights do you get specifically?
So you get the rights to the minerals.
Okay, and for your claim type.
For your claim type, right.
And do you have to discover minerals to get the rights to those minerals?
No, not necessarily, but if it was ever contested, you do have to prove that there are minerals there.
Sorry, that's a trick question.
It is a trick question.
Technically, a mining claim is not valid until you've made a discovery.
Right.
You actually don't have rights to anything until you make a discovery.
Right, but if you already are panning for gold and you know there's gold there, you have found...
You've made a discovery.
You've made a discovery,
you put a location
and
monument there, you file everything.
Right.
Then, yes, you have rights
Yes.
to all the gold and the
Yes.
placer.
So technically,
Material,
with your particular situation, you have your rights.
Right.
But if you were, say, and we've seen this a lot, is people will be driving past this mining stream or this river stream, and they'll say, "Oh, I bet you there's gold there," and then they'll think there's something worth discovering, but without actually doing any sampling. So yeah. So from there, you have your mineral rights. And then you are able to work your claim with small hand tools.
Gotcha.
So you're not drilling, you're not bringing in an excavator, you're not...
Can you do all that at some point?
No, absolutely you can. But you have to follow the process, which is you need to now file an exploration permit, a 3809 permit, and outline exactly what you're going to do, what tools you're going to use, what disturbance you're going to have. You'll then have to have an archaeologist come out to make sure there's no archaeology findings, right? You want to make sure you're not disturbing any historical features. You'll probably need to bring out the bugs and bunny people to make sure you're not doing any disturbance to the wildlife.
Depending on the size.
Depending on the size.
Yeah, like if you're just going out and you want to put in a motorized sluice or a small dredge somewhere that's not sensitive, you may not have to do any of that.
Maybe, but it also depends on what state you're operating in. Every
Right.
state has their own rules. They have their own, processes that you have to follow, your own bonds.
So what's a bond for?
So a bond is putting up money to the state or the BLM that...
Or generally both.
Generally both. Where once you are finished mining, you will have to make sure that proper reclamation has been done. And once that's been done and the BLM or the state checks it off, then you get it back. So it's just an insurance for the state and the government to say, okay, you're doing some disturbance here. We want to prove that you're going to put it back to the way it was. We're taking this money in case you don't do your job. And then if you do finish it and we approve it, we'll give it back to you.
Gotcha. So if you just made a huge mess, and disappeared, never came back, they would have the money to go and hire a contractor to clean it up.
Right. Right. So the days of going out and digging a hole and just leaving it for whatever are gone. We now have many processes to go through where almost every new mine will be reclaimed at some point.
Right. Right. Which is good, but it also makes it difficult for the small time guys.
It makes it difficult for the prospectors. Absolutely. I think my only frustration with it is it's just slow. So it's fine to have all these processes. Most people in the industry are fine to make sure that, everyone's doing their job appropriately.
It's bonded, the studies are done. We're not causing undue degradation.
Right. But it's
habitats.
It's just slow. It's just slow
sites.
getting simple permits through the system.
Gotcha. So talking about permitting and things like that, what are the biggest challenges for landmen today? And women. But say landmen in general. Land people. People without fins that don't swim.
I think one of the biggest challenges that we see in the landman space is just knowing where the mineral rights are. The BLM does their best, but they're not the greatest at keeping their own records. And so we've run into a few issues where a area of land will be designated into wilderness, but that information won't be updated in the public records, which is what we have access to. And so sometimes it makes it very difficult to tell our clients, like, hey, we think this land is open for location. We did all our homework, here's all the processes that we went through, and then you go out and file with the BLM and the mineral rights aren't actually available for location.
I've heard a lot of the claim records aren't being updated quickly either in a lot of different state offices.
Yeah,
I've heard like 5 years in some.
Yeah, so the BLM implemented a new, better system, or so they said, of all of the records for mining claims. And we're talking, thousands of mining claims that need to be recorded and updated. And the BLM just has not figured out their own system. And so it's just extremely painful to know what's actually open for location, who has claims, are they active claims or have they been dropped? September is always a very stressful time of year because that's when all federal mining claims are due. It's due September 1, and there's absolutely no grace period whatsoever. So if you do not file your federal mining, if you do not pay your maintenance fees for your federal mining claim, then you are going to lose your mineral rights.
Gotcha. And you may not actually find out for months or even years afterward because
they're
so far behind in adjudicating that you may get a letter 6 months later that says, hey, you forgot to pay and you've lost your claims. And in the meantime, somebody could have come in September 10th and staked over it, and
they're gone.
We'll get into Landman and some of that a little more. We'll bring in our lead senior auditor for the Landman department to talk about some of the more subtle parts of claims and stuff. But I think this was a good introduction overview. I like having the process there.
Yeah.
And that was a little more detailed. Like a lot of people put it pretty simply, and I think there's still a lot of particularly our international clients, Canadian, Australian, different jurisdictions go, well, can't you just digitally map and submit a map and then you have the mineral rights? Like map it out on your computer, send it to them, pay the fee, and you have it. Like that's not the case at all.
It's not the case at all. And when I hear that, I'm just, even though we have a company that does that, the physical
work,
claim staking, I would be more than happy to have all of that be available online for clients.
Yeah.
I mean, it would just make things so much easier and faster. And then you could actually spend all of that money that you were going out in the field and staking these mining claims. You could use that money to go out and do sampling programs and actually progress your project instead of like hiring people like us, even though we're happy to do the work, but
and even along those lines, like we do the work. And it's a great introduction because we can show the clients with the care and the professional, very high level way that we do the claim staking. We can show the client and build a relationship to help them with exploration and other things. So it's a good service we offer from that perspective, but like it's not very profitable. It's difficult.
Well,
it's something that like
it just feels wasteful for the industry in itself. I mean, it's not even about for the business perspective. It's more of like mining is so difficult and challenging just as is. It's just adding another layer of complexity and expense where it's like, man, if you could just go online and
select the
swath of land that you needed to, and you paid your dues, and you had X amount of time to do an exploration program to prove that you were working the project instead of just holding the land.
Right.
Like that would help our industry here in the U.S. so much.
Well, and just having a simplified, like, I want this 160 acres, and you pay the fee, and you just own the mineral rights.
Yeah.
For the duration. Like, you go through the process, you do all the permitting and everything, but it's just like that simple instead of like competing rights, different types of rights. Like,
oh my gosh,
do I
there's
have
so many
like we could talk
different types
about
of
like
rights.
lithium claims and like staking placer claims, overload claims, and
right. Well,
does
and the
this
fact that
cover
we
what
have two
want?
different types of mining claims is super confusing.
Well, and technically there's 4.
Oh yeah,
because
because you
there's
add
placer claims, load claims, tunnel sites, and mill sites.
Yep.
So there's 4 different types of claims.
Right.
And then there's saleable, leasable, and locatable. So there's different branches of minerals.
And we're talking about locatable minerals in this segment.
Specifically locatable minerals. But I did
Yes.
talk about saleable a little bit with construction aggregates. So.
Right.
But I think that's enough for today. We can go down that rabbit hole a long ways.
We can. It's never ending. It's never ending. But I mean, the bottom line is we want to do best for our clients. I mean,
Right.
we want to do what's right for them. And unfortunately, sometimes that means just following the law.
Yeah, I mean, not unfortunately, but it's unfortunate that it's not streamlined.
Yeah.
And that those dollars couldn't be spent elsewhere because,
Yes.
like, they may spend. I've been told by multiple clients who work internationally. There's a geologist that I know well that's worked in 30 different countries and major projects in 30 different countries. And he said the United States is the most expensive jurisdiction to operate in by far. And mineral rights here, like per acre, per hectare, square kilometer, whatever, are, sometimes 10 to 50 times more expensive than they would be in other jurisdictions. And not just like third world jurisdictions, but like other first world countries have a process where they're spending, at the end of the day, they spend the same amount of money on the project. But here they spend all of that money up front to secure the mineral rights, and then they have to raise the money to do the exploration. Whereas in some of these other countries, part of securing the mineral rights is spending that exploration money. And then if they make a valid discovery, then they can move forward. There's pros and cons. I mean,
Right.
at the end of the day, the Mining Act of 1872 is novel. It opened up tons of opportunities for prospectors, miners. It was great for building the economy in the West. It was great for developing the West. And it's still a great law for so many different things, but there are some aspects of it that are difficult to navigate and cumbersome. But
yeah, but I think you'd see that in a lot of industries as well.
right.
I mean, we just know this one.
We know this one very well.
We understand the
because we
pains
live it
of
and
this
breathe it.
one.
Yeah, Mining Act of 1872, and then all the individual state statutes, because the Mining Act relies a lot on and through the different codes of federal regulations that dictate mining claims and how they're adjudicated and the mineral rights are conveyed and everything. It still leaves a lot up to the states to determine things like the post size and how the maps are
Yep.
done and all that. And so, there's a nice hybrid there, but yeah, definitely limitations. But yeah, thank you. Appreciate filling us in a little bit on that. And I think that was a good
Yeah,
good
and thanks for
coverage.
talking about construction aggregates. That was
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, 2 kind of different sides of the business that are different, and we combine them in unique ways, and totally different perspectives. So it's fun.
Yeah.
Next episode, we will be in Toronto at PDAC, which is the Prospectors and Developers Association of Canada. It's their big conference where all the junior mining companies get together and they drink too much and they have technical sessions and they talk and drink some more. And then there's a big conference there. But we're going to bring all of our gear up and we're going to have an episode there from PDAC. And we're going to bring in some special guests, a couple of guests that we can grab there and talk about different aspects of the industry, but overall just give an update on what's going on in the industry, what some of the trends are and things like that. So definitely stay tuned and we'll see you next time.
Bye.